Grixis midrange, in a lot of ways, this round is an update to blue-black midrange. And in this kind of matchup, playing it from the control side, the difference between the game one and the sideboard games is just night and day.
Oh, yeah. The duresses and negates, they're going to be a big deal in the sideboard games.
Yeah, I feel that both are somewhat lopsided affairs, but in opposite directions. Game one here, Zach's on the play, both players keeping 7, is in Zach's favor, but he really needs it. The idea that he could win 2 sideboarded games in a row is very difficult. Austin with Glint Sleeve Siphoner. On the draw, Essence Scatter from Zach. Being on the play, very helpful in these kind of matchups because of your ability to not get caught off guard by a Siphoner.
Right. Siphoner, one of Colin's best cards on the matchup. Hall having the clean answer there, extremely important.
Just a 3rd land for Zach. A lot of times what the Grixis deck will do is it will set up behind walls of interaction plus light card advantage. So we'll see Glint Sleeve Siphoner or Arguel's Bloodfast. If he doesn't have either of those in play, then Zach can keep pace. Now, because Zach is on black control rather than white control, it means he's better against Siphoner, but he's worse against cards like Champion of Wits.
Right. Yeah, you want to be able to exile Champion of Wits for sure. The Eternalize ability is really at a premium in matchups where both players are able to just make a ton of land drops. You can disallow the champion when you Eternalize it, but you almost have to in a lot of situations just because of how much card advantage and card filtering it provides. And so far, both players just trading land drops. For Collins, he does have all 3 colors online by virtue of that Ether Hub, giving access to red mana. And for Hall, 5th land, still just blue and black sources. No white mana, so no window to cast a Teferi there.
Yeah, in his finishers, 3 copies of Teferi, 3 Scarab Gods, and 2 Torrential Gearhulks. So both players just develop mana here. Now, on Austin's side, he does not have... He has 1 Torrential Gearhulk. He's cut down on some of that.
As players just kind of make land drops, it wouldn't be surprising if Colin's hand is getting gummed up by copies of Abrade, other removal spells, Harness Lightning.
That's going to be the problem here, game one, is that Grixis midrange has a lot of dead cards. If they're just trading land drops, that's in favor of Zach for sure.
Hall does finally produce a Plains, and it looks like the hand is multiple disallows and a Torrential Gearhulk. On an empty battlefield, that hand is excellent.
Now Zach finally misses a land on turn 8. But yeah, multiple Gearhulks, Fatal Push, or multiple disallows, Gearhulk, Fatal Push in hand. He's just waiting for Austin to make a move.
Right. And with the cards available in hand, Hall drawing up to the 5th card, Collins looks like a full grip. This is where Hall wants to start missing land drops. You want to make sure you have enough resources to fight over important spells.
And looking at just how confident Hall is, he drew his 1 main deck copy of Doomfall, but didn't cast it. He just didn't even want to go off of mana for disallows yet.
Right. Now, if you find yourself with 9 mana available, and you can leave up both disallows, then that Doomfall becomes really powerful.
See which player will make a move first. This is going exactly how the control deck wants it to. Austin passes. He's got... Looks like 8 cards in hand, so he's moving to discard. Zach says that's fine, and it looks like Magma Spray will hit the bin.
He's not going to miss that one, though he would rather at least be making a land drop than discarding it. Hall does make that 8th land drop, so he's getting closer to the turn of Doomfall, leave up, double disallow.
So hard for Austin to fight this. I believe he's drawn Arguel's Bloodfast. He has. This is his 1 main deck copy.
That one very easily worth hitting with the disallow.
Yeah, Zach will fight over this.
Yeah, if you let that one resolve, it's just a stream of card advantage. This is not a matchup where Temple of Alcazatz really has a huge impact, but the Bloodfast itself pulling ahead on cards is just has a very profound impact on the game.
It'll be 8. They'll use it 8 times.
Yeah.
It's disallowed by Zach. Temple actually does do something interesting where it can protect your Scarab Gods from Vraska's Contempts. That sometimes, like in really grindy games, that can matter. But you're right, it mostly doesn't do anything.
Right. And in the main deck, it's not surprising to see Collins not able to fight over that Bloodfast. His counter magic available, he has 2 Supreme Wills. Hall has way too much mana for that to have worked, and a Commit to Memory.
Now to play these cards, Austin has cut down to 2 copies of Champion of Wits. In this matchup, Brian, I feel like that's going to hurt him.
Definitely. He has a lot of cards that he just actually wants to discard. In game 1, they're not going to matter at all.
Zach will cast Doomfall. He's finally hit his 9th land, so he can leave up his Torrential Gearhulk. And now we'll see Austin's hand. Harness Lightning, Abrade, Vraska's Contempt. Oh my.
The Scarab God?
Vraska's Contempt, a Scarab God, and a Nicol Bolas. So it's 5 removal spells and 2 threats. This is kind of showing why it's such a bad matchup game 1.
Yeah, those removal spells are just terrible. The Vraska's Contempt can at least answer a Teferi or potentially a Scarab God, but that's really not where you want to be is the problem.
Yeah, right. That's playing Zach's game. He'll say, sure, he'll trade the mana, and then he'll plus the Teferi, let you exile it, and then he'll just move on with his life.
Yeah, that's the one card that some number will still be in post-sideboard.
Yes.
It's better than Harness Lightning and Abrade, but not by a huge margin.
Yeah. When you have pressure, Vraska's Contempt on these threats is great. The issue here is that Austin doesn't have any pressure, and I would assume Zach's going to take one of his 2 threats.
Right. I would be leaning towards the Scarab God over the Nicol Bolas.
Agreed.
Card just generally is higher impact, though the way the hands look right now, Collins is not going to be able to stick any of that.
That's what he does. Scarab God is exiled, so Austin's hand is actually 5 removal spells and a Nicol Bolas. And you see Zach's hand got plenty of cards still ready.
Still has that leftover Disallow, Torrential Gearhulk with that first Disallow available in the graveyard, and Collins with 1 card that matters in hand.
And on Zach's side, I don't expect to see him use that Torrential Gearhulk until he has something like Glimmer of Genius in the graveyard.
Yeah, I mean, Collins just has multiple things that just answer the Gearhulk. The body doesn't matter. You want to actually flash back a good spell.
Canyon Slew cycled from Austin. Those Harness Lightnings on Austin's side are really difficult to convert. They don't actually even remove the Torrential Gearhulk yet.
No, you'd have to throw both of them at it.
And here's Glimmer from Zach. He had drawn it. Big play. Hand. Fatal Push, Disallow, Gearhulk.
So the Fatal Pushes in Hall's hand, they don't amount to much. However, the spells that matter in Hall's hand just matter a lot more than the one in Collins. Disallow is just a catch-all. Nothing's going to sneak past that. Torrential Gearhulk probably represents that Glimmer of Genius.
Double top off the Glimmer. One of them was a cycle land, which he then cycled. But he'll just keep developing his mana. Say go.
In general, putting a cycle land on the bottom or cycling it, not a huge difference, though he's kind of light on cards in graveyard, setting up for maybe up to 7 cards for a search for Azcanta.
I even in Zach's spot wouldn't mind getting my Torrential Gearhulk abraded here, because at some point on Zach's side, I'd like to cast the Scarab God, and if Torrential Gearhulk's in the graveyard, I'm pretty happy with that.
That's a combination.
Glint Sleeve Siphoner from Austin. That's going to meet one of these Fatal Pushes for sure. Looks like he also has a Liliana Death's Majesty, so he may be able to put a lot of pressure on Zach here.
Though it's all easily answered, because the Siphoner just eats a Fatal Push, Hall gets to preserve all the spells in his hand that matter.
Torrential Gearhulk from Zach on Glimmer. Don't think he wants that Swamp. See if he wants either of them. No, he does not. Both to the bottom, he'll draw. Picks up at least 1 Vraska's Contempt. Then he will push away the Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
You'd expect to see Collins try to destroy the Gearhulk in that window when the shields are down, though.
Yeah.
I suppose he has enough stuff that does that, and they're not cards he particularly cares about.
Zach's hand is now 2 Disallows, 2 Vraska's Contempts, so he should have a lot of Austin's threats covered. As Gearhulk swings in, will Austin use a removal spell on it? Not yet. Goes to 15.
To be fair, Collins' life total, not really of much consequence in the matchup. He's electing to fight the battle at the end step, so maybe you could tap Hall off some counter magic. But another thing that's not much of much consequence, that Gearhulk for Hall. He's probably just going to let it go.
I can't imagine him spending a Disallow protecting it.
Right. Yeah, the Disallow is just worth so much more. He also just already knows about that Nicol Bolas in Collins' hand, so he wants to make sure he has an answer to that.
First game result in, Zach's teammate Gerard Fabiano over on the Legacy table takes game 1. He's playing Blue-White Stoneblade.
Batterskull lines up pretty well against Thought-Knots here.
Oh. Has some main deck copies of Back to Basics. Have to assume those are decent against Collis Eldrazi.
That's not a bad one.
Here's Teferi post-combat from Zach. It'll plus. This should get a Vraska's Contempt out of Austin.
Right.
And usually, yeah, he's going to do that with the draw trigger on the stack. We'll see if Zach fights over it. Immediately does. All right, I'll tell you, when I play Control, I don't fight over it there. It's probably because I'm too greedy for my own good.
I'm of the school that would probably let that Contempt go. But if you get to activate Teferi multiple times, you're so firmly in the driver's seat. That's the argument for protecting it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Hall does have a hand that's kind of shaped up with a lot of removal spells, and he seems to have picked up a third Disallow, which makes it a little bit easier to fire off that other one. You do want to make sure that you can actually complete the match in regulation time. So that is a concern for getting some kind of threat to stick on the battlefield. Yeah. Though Hall does have the inevitability in Game 1.
I think they're figuring out whether or not Zach played a land this turn. It's going to be, there's a judge call here on this. It'll be resolved shortly. We'll let you know on the resolution of it.
Should not have a huge impact on the gameplay at all. We'll just figure out where we can get with it.
Yeah, looks like there was some timing window on the untap 2 off Teferi plus when Zach's playing a land. He may not get his land drop. That's, I think, what they're going to rule on here.
Sure.
It's whether or not he had already shown, like, the question is, did Zach progress to his end step? If it does, he can't play the land. And looks like Jazz says no. So he'll give him the land drop, he untaps 2, and we keep going.
And it's not really a relevant mana threshold. Five lands, doesn't leave up Gear Hulk, still just one Disallow. So that call, pretty whatever.
If main phase Austin goes to disallow this Teferi, I'd like to see Zach, and he will, or to contempt it. I don't think Zach can fight over this. We'll see. He's thinking about it. There's some real danger. Then he's tapping low.
If you spend that first Disallow, it's consistent to fight over this one.
Okay.
I agree with what you're saying, but it would be kind of backpedaling on the game plan to fight over the first but not the second.
And then here's the bolus. Does he have the Essence Scatter? He will cycle. No, he does not. He draws into Fatal Push. That's not going to matter. So bolus is on the table for the time being. Zach does have 2 Vraska's Contempts. So
right.
Draw off to Fairy. Draws into Glimmer. This should be just fine.
Oh, yeah. Get that bolus off the battlefield, draw some extra cards.
Glimmer. And Austin says, no, we're good. We're good. Yeah. 1-0, Zach Hall up Game 1.
Yeah, Hall very firmly in the driver's seat there. Colin's likely going to need to win the 2 sideboard games, and he wants to have enough time to do that.
So this is about how I expect the matchup to go. Game 1's really hard. We saw those 5 dead cards in Austin hands. The post-board games, though, if this is anything like blue-black mid-range, they are difficult to play from the control side.
Yeah, Collins has some tools that we'll be seeing come in here. Going to have some duresses and negates. We'll get to those sideboards in just a second here, but you're exactly right. The Grixis deck, much like blue-black before the printing of Nicol Bolas, gains a ton of equity in these sorts of matchups. I will say that Esper is a bit harder than just straight blue-white because they have access to the Scarab God instead of only non-creature spells. But he will be getting better anyway.
All right, so our first tournament here with M19 this weekend. Now, you can still order M19 over from StarCityGames.com. The core set is now on sale. We can do singles, foils, booster boxes, bundles, and more. StarCityGames.com/previews. They are shipping now, so it is officially released.
Yeah, this set has been selling pretty well for a core set.
It's been a while since we've had a core set, but yeah, it's a lot of new stuff in it.
Some really cool enablers. I'm a pretty big fan of Stitcher Supplier.
Yeah, that card's nice.
Alpine Moon, definitely. Some people in it for that card.
Do you think we'll see any of that in Modern this weekend?
It's possible. There's decks that have kind of 3-color mana bases that want to shut off Tron lands but don't want to cast Blood Moon. So it's a cool sideboard card for decks like that. You know, Jund, Grixis theoretically could be playing Alpine Moon.
So let's look at the sideboard plans for each player. On Austin's side, it's a tough one for Zach to deal with. 3 Duress, 2 Negate. He's got some extra removal. Chandra's Feet, Magma Spray, Essence Extraction. Not really into that. Or Hour of Devastation. Then he has Torrential Gearhulk, Jace's Defeat, Glimmer of Genius, Arguel's Bloodfast. I would expect all of those to come in.
Oh, yeah. The 3 Duress, 2 Negate, that stuff's excellent. The Gear Hulk just backs up your counter magic. That's great. Jace's Defeat, also great. Counters both Teferi and the Scarab God, which matters quite a bit against Esper. The Glimmer of Genius, the Arguel's Bloodfast, that stuff's all extra cards. That's what the matchup's about. And he just has a ton of removal spells he has to get off of that are in the main deck.
Right. He has a 9-card sideboard to board in. Do you see what are our easy cuts?
2 Magma Spray, a Fatal Push, 2 Abrade, 2 Harness Lightning.
We're at 7.
An Unlicensed Disintegration.
8, this is easy.
Yeah. Not hard to find an extra card. You can shave on Vraska's Contempt. That's pretty reasonable.
Or a Whirler Virtuoso, maybe?
Sure.
Sure. I guess 4 Contempts is a lot.
Yeah.
On Zach's side, and so I know about this one, the side that I've played this from some. He's got 2 Bantu's Last Reckoning, 2 Moment of Craving, 2 Essence Extraction, 2 Gonti, 2 Eldest Reborn, a Karn, a Sorceress Spyglass, an Arguel's Bloodfast, or Forsake the Worldly, and a Doomfall. So the difficulty here is that the cards that are beating you are different types of cards. So you need to deal with Siphoner and Bloodfast, for example.
Right.
And you have cards that can answer one or both. The hard part is if you get caught with the wrong one. If your opponent gets, say, a Arguel's Bloodfast you're stuck with Essence Scatters, it doesn't take very long before the game is out of control.
Right. And because your answers do need to be kind of pointed, they need to target different things at different times, that's why you're going to see Hall reaching for his own card advantage engines. His own copy of Arguel's Bloodfast becomes pretty important because you need to have a mix of things. I actually like Gonti, Lord of Luxury, quite a lot in the matchup. You can grab their Negate or their Duresses, and you can fight over that, or just one of their threats, and sometimes turn the game on its head like that. And I'm actually really big on these 2, the Eldest Reborns. That card is so good in mid-range matchups. It really surprised me the first time somebody cast it against me because it's an uncommon, but it just squares up really well against a lot of mythic rares.
Yeah, the more Zach can play like a mid-range deck here, the better it's going to be because playing straight control against Austin's sideboard plan is just risky.
Right. That extra Doomfall in Hall's sideboard is pretty powerful. Now, he doesn't know this. Collins is only on 2 Champion of Wits, but exiling that one can be very important.
I might even see him use these Moment of Craving. They're not great, but Glint Sleeve Siphoner is such a problem.
Yep.
I suppose that he could just stick to Fatal Push.
I think Fatal Push is a fair amount better in the matchup.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen too often, but theoretically you could Fatal Push and Nicol Bolas. I don't know that we're going to see that, but...
Sorceress Spyglass is a possibility. It shuts down Bloodfast. Your opponent plays 2.
Yes.
It can have some play against Liliana. I suppose it can have some play against Bolas. Bolas transforms.
Right. Yeah, it's a fine card.
There's all these answers that are fine, but they only, say like Spyglass. Okay, 3 Bolas, 1 Liliana, 2 Bloodfast. It's good against those cards, but that's 6 cards. And all your removal feels like it's good against half the deck.
Yep.
Whereas his threats are always good.
It is nice to have the Spyglass because if your hand is able to answer the other stuff, you cast the Spyglass and you're like, okay, now I just don't have to worry about Liliana Death's Majesty for the duration of the game.
Yeah, especially blue-black doesn't remove Spyglass at all. So it can almost, in a weird way, act as a 2-for-1, especially against a card where they play multiples.
Right. And I would expect Austin to not have the Abrades in post-sideboard.
Well, I suppose he is a red deck, so in theory he can answer it. But yeah, I would expect.
Yeah, pretty mopey.
I was thinking about with regular blue-black mid-range, they actually just can't answer your artifacts and enchantments.
Right. Yeah, Abrade is a cool utility card that's seeing play really in every format.
Yeah.
Though, unlike Colligan's command, you don't want to leave it in against everybody. Doesn't really have enough raw power. It's just a good conversion on 2 mana as a disruptive spell. This is a matchup where it doesn't really answer stuff that you need to answer or really want to answer in that way.
And both players keeping on 7. Here we go. Tap land for Austin. The first big moment of the game is going to see what's Austin's turn 2 play. Ooh. And pass. That's a huge win for Zach.
Yeah. No Siphoner, no Bloodfast.
Right.
And at this stage, leaving up Negate, that doesn't really matter. So 2 mana, not terribly threatening.
See, a search for Escanta will be negated from Austin.
It is a good one to negate, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, a lot of times when on the Grixis side, I hope to be using my negates offensively. So that being a defensive negate.
Yeah. It's not worth mulliganing to a 6-card hand to try to get in that position, though.
Absolutely. Now, Zach makes a 3rd land drop, but look at those lands carefully. 2 swamps means Austin is not scared of Disallow, and now he'll go for Arguel's Bloodfast.
All right, now things are scary.
Yep. Yeah, with 2 mana up, especially for blue-black, or Esper. They do not answer Bloodfast as well as the blue-white deck does.
Right. Not looking at cast outs, there's cast downs in this deck.
Forsake the Worldly, however, from Zach. Austin, is he going to negate it or draw a card? He'll just draw a card. Okay. So Bloodfast is actually managed here as it's exiled away.
Worst case scenario here would be Hall having a Gonti on this turn, but he has a lot less than that.
He passes. He did not hit the land. He drew another Disallow. Still uncastable. Now Austin actually with nothing on the way back, so Zach got a turn off and then hit the land. I think he's actually okay.
Yeah, that untapped blue source there, that's pretty huge for Hall.
End step Glimmer from Austin.
With there not really being a threat of anything coming down on 4, would have been reasonable for Austin to main phase this, though
I was thinking that too.
It's not super likely to be countered anyway, especially because he's getting to the territory of casting a 5-mana Haymaker. Yeah, so he has resolved the Glimmer. He's played Canyon Slough for the turn.
Yeah, there's the 1 of Glimmer out of the sideboard for Austin. He just passes back, though. The fact that he doesn't have a threat in play matters a lot here.
Right.
Glimmer of Zach's own. No fight from Austin.
And if he is able to find some land drops here, that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
In the post-sideboard games, Collins is more able to fight as the game goes long. His hand is going to be things like negates that Jace's defeat instead of things like a Braid and Harness Lightning.
Zach topped 2 lands off that Glimmer. Can't say I disagree. Pretty in for that.
Yeah.
5th land, will Zach go for anything like Teferi? No, he won't. He'll just pass.
Not worth it. You don't want to get that countered.
No. 6th land from Austin. Gearhulk's now possibly online, but looks like he has a 2-mana play in mind. It's another Arguel's Bloodfast, his 2nd copy. This time Zach has Disallow up.
I'm pretty sure this one is worth a fight, especially with just 2 activations just sitting right there.
Over on the legacy table, Zach's teammate Gerard Fabiano, a 2-1 winner over Odin Enzmann.
I spot a Commit Memory in Collins' hand. It's not the ideal spell to fight a counter war with.
Yeah, he also has Jace's Defeat. And I think he's going to go for that because that means he gets a card off Bloodfast.
Right. You also have the Commit down the line. You can deal with a permanent with that one.
However, this gives Zach an opportunity to make Teferi. We might see a bit of a slugfest now. If Control can't keep control of the game, your plan B is to just start mid-ranging.
Right. I don't mind if my opponent has Search for Escanta when I have Bloodfast. I do mind if they have Teferi.
Yeah, well, Teferi, you could just play it and -3 it if he's really that worried about Bloodfast.
Right.
I mean, the big worry would be he makes Teferi, and if it gets negated here, then Zach's just in a world of trouble.
Right.
He says go, Austin, and watch this. Austin's going to use the mana for Bloodfast, and then Gearhulk forsake the Worldly. Nice play on Zach's side. The only way Austin could have prevented that would have been to not use Bloodfast, and that's just too much.
Mm-hmm. You also have to have something that answers the Gearhulk. He did cast his Jace's Defeat already.
Right.
You can leave up a negate and fight the Forsake, But then you have to deal with the Gear Hulk. It's not a huge win for you.
No, you'd have to have Supreme Will, and at that point he's leaving up 3 mana, and I don't know. I just take my cards.
Yeah. It just kind of lined up in a way where that Bloodfast really wasn't going to stick around.
We're going to see Unlicensed Disintegration on the Gear Hulk. And now we're at the point where Zach might start trying for Teferis.
Yep. Clear battlefield. He's dealt with the 2 Bloodfast. Typically, that's the only you're only going to see 2 copies. A third copy is a little bit outside of the norm. I've seen it, but it's unpopular.
And here's Teferi. He will make the play. There's still that commit in hand for Austin that you mentioned. He'll let Teferi resolve. Plus, Zach draws the card. Tap land, and when he tries to untap lands, here's Vraska's Contempt. Still a 2-for-1, though, for Zach. Can't say I mind on the control side. For a post-board game, this matchup, this is going pretty well for Zach.
Yeah. That was a good window to cast the commit, but because he had Contempt, and it doesn't really matter against much else in the matchup, that's the argument for using it there. You do fall behind on cards, which is unfortunate.
You can see Austin with no follow-up play to punish Zach for tapping low, and that's just the problem. Zach's now becoming the mid-range deck. Here's Gonti.
Gonti is one of the most frustrating cards to play against.
Yeah, Austin will commit. He understands just that he can't lose this mid-range fight. So Gonti coming back in a couple turns. Zach says go. He has a Karn in hand, too. He's just mid-ranging better.
And you do really want to make sure you keep the Gonti off the battlefield because it can find just a myriad of things that are all kind of problems. If it leads up Negate, that's already a problem on its own, but sometimes it just grabs one of your small number of win conditions. Not only lowers your ability to actually close the game, but it just gives Hall his own opportunity to beat you with your own Scarab God.
Eldest Reborn drawn from Zach. This is just all the mid-range hits.
Yeah. Doesn't amount to much here.
No?
But it gives him some security.
And the next card down is Gonti.
Right.
Here he'll cast Karn. And he plussed the Karn. So, Ryan, I didn't actually like this move as much because we knew Gonti was the top card of the deck. I think I liked making a creature.
Yeah. The creature would not be great in this battlefield, but because you know that you're drawing a good card, I am on board with that argument.
Right, and as it is, Austin gave him the Vraska's Contempt, and Gonti's now hanging out in exile. It's still a win for Zach. He's still +1 card off this, as he's been doing off all his draws right now.
Yeah.
Draws another Teferi, and I see no reason for him to stop mashing these Planeswalkers. He'll go for Teferi.
Yeah, they seem to be resolving.
Yeah, they're resolving and getting contempted. That's fine.
Right.
Again, with the draw on the stack, here's Vraska's Contempt. Zach says, okay, sure, I'll draw my card. You're going to run out of those eventually.
Yep. It looks like Hall hanging out with 1 Disallow and a couple removal spells.
Yeah.
So you won't see him be as aggressive in defending his threats because he's a little bit lighter on counter magic, a little heavier on ways to stop Collins from winning the game.
Yeah, he's got Fatal Push, Eldest Reborn, Disallow, it looks like, and then a basic island. And here's another land. It's, I believe, a cycling land. So you can turn that into something else. We'll say go. And Austin still has yet to make a threat. He needs to win this match. Odin Enzmann has already lost over on the legacy table. And right now, Zach is actually drawing more lands. That is a way for Austin to undo this card advantage, as if he just floods a little less.
Yeah.
The Eldest Reborn, cast here from Zach.
Yeah, frequently you want to make sure you can tag a creature with this, but if this is the way the game is shaping up, it does ultimately end up with Hall having something like a Teferi on the 3rd stage of the saga.
And here is Torrential Gearhulk from Austin. That'll get hit by a Disallow. Yeah, that first ability on the saga not doing anything. The next 2 will matter.
Yeah, the discard can be pretty significant in the matchup, and putting a creature or a planeswalker from a graveyard onto the battlefield is always huge.
Yeah, that's the reason Zach's casting it, is for that, no, for that 3rd part to the saga. But he's tapped low and had to use a Disallow already. This is the window here for Austin to do something.
I suppose the Teferis have been exiled, but this still represents Gear Hulk, I believe, for a glimmer in the graveyard.
And the Scarab God is cast on Austin's side, and that could, unless there's a Planeswalker in a graveyard, Scarab God in play would blank the third part of Eldest Reborn.
Yeah, you do have to target with that. I believe Hall has been hanging out with one or two of Vraska's Contempts.
Okay, so he has the first Scarab God covered. I guess if Austin has this Scarab God and another in hand, he could fade this. He's going to immediately use Scarab God. Scarab God got to resolve here. And he'll bring back Torrential Gear Hulk. Ryan, this game has turned on its head a bit. He will go ahead and bring back Zach's Gear Hulk, casting, it looks like, his own Memory. Or is it Commit? We'll see which half he wants.
Yeah, he's lighter on cards in hand, and the card is sideways.
Yeah,
so
he's casting Memory. Both players shuffle their graveyards in. Hey,
this takes the cards out of the graveyard.
Yeah, Eldest Reborn's no good.
That's nice. Now, he is hoping for these draw 7s to shake up in a particular way. You want Hall to draw a bunch of lands, and you want you to draw a bunch of spells.
That token there signifying that this is Zombie Gear Hulk.
Not the most elegant solution to this I've ever seen, but yes, it does tell the story.
I don't know, Ryan. Robots can't be zombies. I don't get it.
A robot zombie sounds like about the most frightening thing I can imagine.
It doesn't even, how does it work?
Second only
robots don't need to eat brains.
To a robotic
they don't eat.
Velociraptor.
Well, those are scary. That's like a cyborg.
A zombie robot Velociraptor is possibly the actual most horrifying thing I could conceive of.
I just don't get how zombie robots work. But somehow this game, Zach, despite going for a mid-range plan, Zach's deck isn't as well set up for mid-ranging, and that's really what we saw. Scary part about Memory here from Austin's side, however, is that Zach gets to cast all his cards first. So here's Sorceress Spyglass. Assume that's going to name the Scarab God. But it might name a Planeswalker. We'll see. And look, there's an Abrade in Austin's hand, however. It's got Negate, Abrade, Champion of Wits, Torrential Gear Hulk, 2 lands.
Pretty reasonable hand, and an amusing thing about that Memory resolving is Hall has picked up a Torrential Gear Hulk, but there's just no cards in graveyard. So it's not really of much consequence here.
Yeah. So yeah, in hand, nothing too big. I mean, you can stop Eternalize on Champion. That's a ways off.
Yeah, that's... Ugh.
Is he going to name Canyon Slew? That's too aggressive.
He doesn't really have good names, right? He just has to name something, and he knows about the Abrade anyway.
Okay. He names Canyon Slew. All right.
That's a fine name.
Vraska's Contempt will take care of Scarab God.
Yeah.
There's still nothing in the graveyard for that Eldest Reborn just yet.
Right.
Zach makes a 6th land. He does have Torrential Gear Hulk. Now, the only thing in his graveyard is the Contempt he just cast.
It's a fine one to have access to. You can just go ahead and take care of this 4/4 Gear Hulk. Though, once you're casting your 5/6 Gear Hulk, you're kind of covered there anyway.
That Eldest Reborn going to amount to very little unless he can find something to reanimate. And Zach will tap below Gear Hulk to make search for Azcanta.
He does know about that Abrade in Austin's hand, which can still just go for the Gear Hulk if he chooses to cast it.
Right. Back to Austin Collins we go. Draws Aether Hub. Like to take that search for Azcanta. We're still a ways off at mattering. Looks like Austin's going to go for Champion of Wits.
And he'll want to not discard creatures, though.
Right.
I imagine he'd be choosing to discard that Canyon Slew or some other kind of lands.
Well, Zach, what this does let him do is if he can somehow turn on Revolt, he can Fatal Push the champion and then get the champion back with Eldest Reborn and actually convert.
Yeah, that would pretty much rely on Collins firing off that Abrade.
Collins discarding 2 lands. That's one way to cycle your Canyon Sloughs.
I've discarded a lot of cycling lands at Champion of Wits. You know, it saves you 2 mana.
Well, they can't cycle right now.
Right. It's even better here, but I think it's fine to do just in general.
Yeah, it just makes mana. And the Gearhulk swings. Zach will cycle. And finds Vraska's Contempt. So Eldest Reborn's not going to do anything. Well, I guess, hold on, he has Field of Ruin. He can upkeep, push the champion, and then reanimate it.
Okay, that's worth something.
And that's what he's going to do, yeah. And I like what he did with Search for Azcanta. He's using kind of this as a, say, scry. Kept it on top, though.
Yeah, if you have a card that you want to draw, that kind of makes things a little bit differently. You do have to target when you put the Eldest Reborn trigger on the stack.
Just checking that.
Yeah, so you can't wait to draw your card, is my understanding, because as soon as it goes off, you have to target something.
Right, I don't believe, so Zach hasn't drawn his card yet. So I think if he wants to convert this, then he has to, before his draw, Field of Ruin, then Fatal Push the champion, and then he should be in the clear?
Yeah, sagas are really weird and unique templating, where they trigger when you draw your card.
Yeah, he was checking with the judge to make sure he's doing all this right.
Seems like it works.
Yeah. So the idea is he wants to reanimate Champion of Wits at the end of the day. That's the punchline.
Yeah. And we do know that Austin does have a negate at the ready. He could fight over this, though the Eldest Reborn, that's just going to put Champion of Wits on the battlefield. That's not really a huge concern. It does ramp up that search for Azcanta, which is actually the biggest problem about this.
Yeah, I mean, you hate having to spend a negate on Fatal Push, but the way this board looks, he might have to. So, Revolt is enabled. Here is Fatal Push on Champion of Wits. Will Austin fight? No. And now Eldest Reborn going to try to reanimate that champion. That'll work. That'll bring Zach up to 7 cards in graveyard after he draws, loots through 2. So,
yeah, you already had 1 land you wanted to discard and a couple good spells, but finds another land to pitch, and so now the hand's shaping up. That Azcanta is coming very close to transforming.
And despite that memory cast from Austin, it looks like Zach has wrenching control of the game again. And with a game win here, that will be good enough. Austin then step will abrade his own champion, put it back in his graveyard.
Which is where you want them to be. But Collins does have a good amount of disruption available.
Life correction here. I believe Zach Hall at 17. We missed that Gearhulk hit from the last turn. Looks like it's 18. Apologies. The Gearhulk is a 4-4. Not a 5-6. So we'll swing for 4 more. Here's Glimmer from Zach. 2 cards in hand.
Yeah, Austin had cast at Abrade, so here looks like he's lining up to Glimmer, then Gearhulk to flash back the Glimmer, then throw the 5-6 in front of the 4-4 Gearhulk.
Well, Austin has to be careful. That Search for Azcanta is about to transform. Austin does, it appears, have 2 more copies of Torrential Gearhulk in his hand, so he's got a ton of threats here, but he's not going to be able to compete with Azcanta.
It depends how quickly Azcanta can clean up the battlefield, right?
That's exactly it.
Frequently it can, but as far as pressure on the battlefield with those Gearhulks,
yeah, Austin's got a lot.
He's forcing Zach to produce these answers in a pretty quick manner.
Right, this attack's coming in for 4. It looks like it hits, so Zach's to 14. So can Azcanta clean up the battlefield before Zach drops to 0? That's going to be the question. I think we're going to go starting on Austin's turn now for an Eternalize on Champion of Wits. Remember, blue-black has no fumigate or sweeper here, so Austin doesn't have to slow down how much he's committing to the board, really.
Right.
This could get disallowed. Torrential Gear Hulk from Zach. I like this.
Wants to do this before Austin can draw those cards and maybe produce that Jace's defeat that was shuffled back in.
It resolves. It was a Gear Hulk from Zach. He flashed back Glimmer of Genius. So now Champion of Wits is in play. Austin draws 4. He'll discard 2. Gets rid of 2 more lands. This is a 4/4. Austin should have a land and then another Gear Hulk in play. He'll pass. 5 mana up. So it doesn't have Gear Hulk up. He does have Vraska's Contempt up. So back to Zach. Upkeep. Card with Search for Azcanta. Top card's a Teferi. He'll put in his hand but transform that search anyway. Teferi not too bad here. Actually, as far as cleaning up the board, the -3 is just a removal spell.
Yep. You don't have to worry about any of these things coming back. They're just creature tokens.
Right. Based on where the game's at, I expect Zach to use that -3 pretty quickly.
He also just has a 5/6 in front of the 4/4s. Depending on what he has to back that up, drawing cards is also pretty inviting.
Yeah, he'll make another Search for Azcanta. And looks like Vraska's Contempt on the Gear Hulk. Zach's going to Glimmer. Finds Disallow and another card. He'll put the Disallow on top. Draw 1 deeper. Looks like he found another Glimmer. All right, with as much mana as he has, that's pretty free.
He's been able to just produce a ton of extra cards.
Right. That's why I want to see him start converting stuff like cards like Teferi into removal. I think he's got, with Azcanta and these Glimmers and 3 Disallows, once he answers the board, he should be in the clear here. And he's going to go ahead and disallow that Vraska's Contempt. So the way he's trying to answer the board, it looks like, is he's just going to protect this blocker.
Yep. It's a reasonable way to do it. It outsizes these creatures. He still has a little bit of life to play with.
Right. He's got another Disallow in hand as well as a Vraska's Contempt.
And Collins did draw 4 extra cards. He had discarded some lands, but going into this turn, he has a lot of compositions that can try to answer this Gear Hulk twice on this turn.
Yeah, he's got to do that. He's got Zach at 14, but once Zach untaps those lands, that's so many more cards again.
If Collins could take care of the Gear Hulk and connect for 8, though, that's a huge ask for Hall's mana on the following turn.
It is. Here's another Vraska's Contempt. It's main phase from Zach. Will it earn his last Disallow?
Other option he has is let this go and just fire off Contempt at one of these creatures. Seems like you're going to inevitably do that anyway.
8 lands in play for Austin. The scariest follow-up would be if Austin had Scarab God plus 4 mana, but he's 1 short of that. So I think Zach can comfortably disallow here.
Yeah, the 5/6 just kind of making sure nothing can break through is worth a bit more than just casting the Contempt, though you're not confident you can win that fight, and the Disallow can be worth a bit more on a future turn.
So he's going to let that go.
You're using more of your mana to Contempt now, which is a point in that favor.
Yeah, actually Austin has land 9 in hand, so now he swings. So Scarab God would be online if Austin has it. Will Zach drop to 6? He will. End step, he can either Glimmer, Azcanta, or Vraska's Contempt. We'll see which one he goes for. And here is Bolus from Austin Collins. So hold on. And you know, as much as I want to use Glimmer or Search here, Ryan, I feel like on Zach's side I just have to keep jamming removal. But he's going to go the other way. He's going to cast Glimmer. Maybe if he's put a card like Bantu's Last Reckoning in from the sideboard, that makes a lot more sense here.
That would be a huge find.
Now, good news on their side, 6 minutes remain in the round, and right now, Austin and his teammate Dylan Hand have yet to get a game win. It's hard to see them actually winning from here. Fatal Push takes care of Nicol Bolas on Zach's side.
Yeah, losing that Gear Hulk enabled Revolt.
Yeah, that's actually big.
Yeah, that makes the Glimmer there make a ton more sense.
Right, because if you find, because your Fatal Push is converted.
Yeah, now you can start trying to deal with these other creatures.
Yeah, here's Scarab God, tons of mana.
Ooh, and that Scarab God makes dealing with 4/4 attackers
easy.
Very easy.
Yeah. There's some Gear Hulks in the graveyards yet? I guess the last one was just exiled. It's still fine. I mean, Zach has 9 mana to go with his Scarab God, and he has plenty of disallows to protect it. So it looks like this is what he was setting up for. He'll just go ahead and say go. Back over to Austin.
Yeah, Scarab Godding Nicol Bolas as a blocker is a pretty big win.
Have to say I agree.
You get that trigger so they discard, get to trade away in combat.
Contempt from Austin. His hand is 2 Contempt and 2 Gear Hulks. He's got a lot of fight in him here. We'll see if he can convert it. Zach's hand has at least 1 disallow.
Collins looks a bit shy on casting 2 Gear Hulks. I believe 10 mana is available.
So we'll disallow to start on this Vraska's Contempt. Austin has a negate. He'll negate. Zach lets those spells trade. Now he'll use Scarab God. Oof, he gets Bolas. He's going to get one of Austin's Gear Hulks. Austin just has 2 cards in hand. It's not half bad. What other creature options do we have? It's a Nicol Bolas and just a Nicol Bolas. Well, all right then. That makes the choice pretty easy.
Right. And spell options for casting the Gear Hulk are not great right now.
Yes, he just can. Oh, so he discards a Torrential Gear Hulk. Fortunately for Austin, the Scarab God's gone now.
You can Gear Hulk try to Contempt, and if your Contempt gets across here, if you can Contempt that Bolas, you get in for lethal. Just 2 mana available for Hall.
So this is lethal, isn't it? Here's Torrential Gear Hulk. Has Austin done it? I think he has. You're right.
This looks like a perusing of the graveyard to see how what cards were cast here. I don't think Hall has anything. Oh yes, Censor. That I'll pay 1.
Okay. That's going to exile the Bolas, and there's the lethal swing. Austin takes game 2.
Oh, this is going to a draw. 3 minutes is not going to get either player there.
I don't think so.
They're going to be looking at the modern
what
seat
about
potentially.
What about the play there, Ryan? That just felt like a steal from Austin Collins' side. But it was well played for him to get to that spot. The post memory is, I think, when things got interesting.
It was really well navigated. I think that memory was a huge win for Collins. And just the way it was shaking up, Collins was the aggressor. You're saying a lot about the cards that Hall produced, but the issue he consistently had was that all of his spells cost 4 and 5 mana, right? Hall was not really able to cast as many spells as he needed to cast. If he had 6 more mana or whatever, he could have cast a fairy there, dealt with one of those creatures. He had good spells that he drew. He wasn't able to convert them all, and that was a choking point for Hall.
Yeah. I mean, he still had. You're right. The choking point was mana. I mean, he never got around to actually being able to tap the Azcanta. He still had a Glimmer in hand, I think, at the end of the game, and another Teferi and another Vraska's Contempt. If he can cast all these removal spells, he'll be fine.
Right. And the issue is actually being able to do that. And it's tough in this matchup.
All right, so we're going to be starting game 3 with just under a minute. It's unlikely that any player can finish here. Austin has hands that can do it. An early Siphoner draw.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. You can generate a fair number of games where, maybe a player's missing land drops, maybe you get out in front with Bloodfast or Siphoner, and you can say, all right, I believe I'm going to win this game. Would you like to concede? I think that's about the best we're going to be able to do. Now, the matchup has a ton of play to it.
Yeah, I mean, if the last game just is an indicator of that.
You see very few runaways here.
All right, so they will get some turns in before the start.
A lot of eyes on the modern matchup. Yeah, players going to draw up their 7s.
Zach taking a mulligan.
The texture of the matchup is really similar to a lot of matchups where historically you'd be interested in taking a draw. But because the spells are so expensive here, you really want to be the player with the mana advantage, so you end up wanting to take the play. And because the threats are just so powerful, being the first to be able to threaten them is a pretty big deal.
And we've hit time in the round, which this means it should be a win for the team of Fabiano, Ingram, and Hall. There's really no... Yeah, you see the teams are actually just going to go ahead and shake hands on this. For them to contest this, they'd have to win one of the other 2 matches, which just isn't going to be possible.
Right. Yeah, not sure where the modern match was, but hand would have